Moonpig.
Hello and welcome to the Moonpig Tech Podcast. Today I'm with Rob. Rob, how are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you, Leon. How are you?
Not too bad actually. Yeah, it started to rain a bit, but mustn't grumble. It's quite nice after this heat we've been having. We're joined today by Ash Grennan, who's going to chat to us about asynchronous communication. Ash, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure thing. Hi, I'm Ash, senior engineer at Moonpig. I'm in a team that covers customer auth and orders functions, and yeah, I'm happy to be here today.
Great stuff. So, Ash, why are you interested in the way that engineering teams communicate?
It's a really good question. A couple of years ago, I was mentoring someone who was an associate at Moonpig, and we were having a catch up, and they told me that they were struggling to contribute towards technical meetings. Now, I was aware that we're seniors in this team, and therefore the default option would be to think, well, perhaps, this person just doesn't have the experience of some of the other team members, or perhaps they lack a particular piece of knowledge. However, when I do into the issue a little bit more, I was surprised to find it was nothing to do with technology. It was quite simply that English wasn't this person's native language. And that this made me think about creating more of an inclusive playing field for all people, regardless of your language, regardless of if you've got disabilities or you're non-neurotypical, and made me question when we use meetings and why we use them. And that just set off an interest of trying to bring things towards organizations and reflecting on what I've done in the past in terms of just making us more effective communicators and trying to choose the right tool for the right job.
So, when you started looking at this, what were your initial observations? How were the team communicating?
Probably like most organizations, I saw that it was pretty meeting heavy. And I feel like the reason behind that is just because of the barrier to entry for meetings nowadays. So it's so easy to open up your calendar, tag a few people in, and put a time that everyone, I say everyone, most people default it to it as their primary communication mechanism, when in actual fact, it should really depend on what you're trying to communicate and what you're trying to capture. And from there, you should therefore choose the right tool. Whereas people, as I say, would just default into this. And I feel like the best thing to do is to simply highlight the benefits and drawbacks of each communication method, because I don't feel like people are informed enough to choose the right communication method. So it was kind of just spreading a message and just showing people, like, hey, have you thought about Async for this because of these reasons, and so on and so forth.
So, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you mentioned how things have changed, particularly in recent years when we're working more remotely. And it's almost like we're trying to recreate the synchronous nature of an office environment. And the only way we've really got of doing that is by arranging meetings and going onto video calls. And like you say, that just becomes the default. So, what could we do instead?
So there's a variety of things. I mean, number one, we could look at improving meetings as they are. So that's one option. Another option is, of course, choose something that isn't synchronous, primarily asynchronous communication mechanism. So that's, written words, just writing things down, whether that be sharing a doc, could be an email, it could be instant messaging, like Slack or Teams, for instance. So it's just about choosing, as I said earlier, the right tool for the right job.
You said in terms of sort of written documentation, I mean, that, as we know, takes all sorts of different forms. How has that been changing these days? Because obviously there's a lot of talk of AI and how that affects the industry. So, what's the impact of that on those written forms of communication?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Of course, we have a lot of tools these days that can transcribe meetings, and that creates a bit of a hybrid approach. Whereas before, we'd have the meeting or we'd have written words, and with AI able to transcribe things, what it does is it removes some of the drawbacks of meetings. For instance, like many people can't attend, let's say, a series of meetings. It's very difficult. And because of this, they miss out on context. And because they miss out on context, let's say they were going to the future meeting, let's say it's a series of meeting, and they go to a future meeting, they can then still be part of the conversation without having a huge knowledge gap because AI has transcribed the previous meeting and has output a series of notes for them to catch up on. So it helps with some of the drawbacks and also in the inclusivity part, like people have to work different schedules. And some people even work across time zones as well. But let's say you're a parent, for instance, and you have to pick up your child, and therefore you miss out on a meeting's contents. It enables you to catch up and remain part of that conversation should it continue. So yeah, it's definitely helped bridge the gaps, I would say, in terms of communication.
So before AI became this thing that's, helping people do this, we would have someone take minutes, or meetings would come out with minutes. Was that not enough to keep people up to date?
Um, the problem with that, I would say, is more often than not, and I hate to say it, people would forget. Not only would people forget to write them, even if they did write them and do a reasonable job, they then forget to share them. And then they just remain behind closed doors for the rest of time. So this kind of automated transcriber just helps fill that gap just in case. Obviously, still take manual notes and draw your own conclusions. Like it's not a black and white scenario where you have to choose one or the other. Like often Moonpig, in my experience, do both. And I think that's really, really good because the transcribers can catch a little bit more detail than, say, a human can. Because it's quite difficult to keep up with conversation and type a lot of things unless you're a typist.
I think as well, also, it actually doesn't stop the flow of the conversation, does it? Because I remember in the past when I've been working with teams that have actually been quite dedicated to taking minutes, someone would actually pause and say, right, okay, I've just written this down as X. And everyone says, yeah, that sounds about right. And that's actually interrupting the flow. The great things about these tools is it's sitting there in the background, just taking notes, summarizing, which is quite nice. It sounds there from the way we're talking that great, we've got these little AIs taking notes, everyone can catch up if they're not in the meetings. Problem solved?
Um, no, not entirely. I mean, one of the great benefits of async communication, as you're probably both aware, it's knowledge retention, if I'm honest. So if somebody else writes something, especially if it's in a meeting context, you may take some of it in, like remember it, but you'd remember significantly more if you write it yourself because you've got to articulate your own thoughts and then write that down on paper. Like often we use writing as a retention exercise, right? So is it problem solved? Not really. It's just it enables us to move at speed that otherwise we perhaps couldn't move at, but there has to be some kind of cost to moving that quick. And I guess the cost really is quality, right? If people retain less because they're not writing the things from meetings, for instance, then people's knowledge of what actually transpired in those meetings might be a little bit less. But once again, it comes back to this right tool for the right job. What we're optimizing for. If we're optimizing for speed, then absolutely AI transcribing is brilliant. If we're optimizing for quality and depth and thoughtfulness, perhaps not. Perhaps still manually writing is the right tool there.
You mentioned earlier about instant messaging, and of course, instant messaging isn't instant, it's an asynchronous form of communication. How do you decide essentially when to have a meeting and when to use an asynchronous form like instant messaging?
Yeah, really good question. I think this is just my opinion, but I think it comes down to what you're trying to communicate. Okay, so for instance, what a meeting's very good at, as I've just mentioned, is speed, right? covering a lot of ground. So we can think of breadth here. You can cover a lot of ground quickly. So if you're just ideating on, let's say, how can we help customers log in, throwing just ideas out there and getting like instant feedback on those ideas, and then people maybe adding to your ideas is really, really good in a meeting context. So we take advantage of the like low latency that meetings provide and also the high bandwidth. A lot of people can be part of that conversation, which is great. And that's true for video meetings, it's true for in-person meetings. Now, if we were going to have a conversation about exploring something technically, like is this feature technically feasible based on X and Y? That perhaps isn't so great for a meeting because what we need to do there is we need to think deeply about a problem. We might need to go off, Google some things, talk to some people, reflect on our own thoughts, maybe play around with some architecture diagrams, just try and build a mental model of whether the idea is possible. To do this in a synchronous context is next to impossible because if you're in a meeting and you're trying to think deeply, by the time you've come back from your own thoughts, the meeting's already moved on and it's a minute's elapsed, right? We simply can't do it. We're not made this way. So for me, it would be just choosing what you're trying to focus on first and just outlining it. Okay, this meeting is an exploratory meeting, i.e., we're just going to go over things at a really, really high level and an idea on ideas. And yeah, if we're exploring something technically quite deep or a specific domain, then yeah, perhaps async is the way to go because then we can write our thoughts down, go off, think about it some more, write some more, and we can have a conversation there.
So it's about not just rushing straight to the meeting, it's actually thinking about, okay, what is the goal of the activity we're about to do? And then setting ourselves up for success that way. So I guess, yeah, it's if it's a meeting, you want a detailed agenda. If you need to give everyone time to actually think about things before you get together to do to make the decision, then it's factoring time in for that kind of thing. Is it about thinking a bit more deep about what you want to achieve?
Yeah, I think it is because like in a meeting, if you're trying to do something quite difficult, a complex problem, or dive into something that requires what I define as like deep thinking, you can only really use your own existing knowledge in a synchronous manner. Like you ask me how I'm going to build something, and I reply with maybe some kind of architecture that I've used 1,000 times, like a Lambda to API gateway, something like that. And the problem with that is that I'm inherently biased. I'm biased in the sense that I'm telling you what I've done a lot of times before, not necessarily what is the best solution for this problem. The reason I'm doing that is because I have to just immediately react and tell you. I can't go away and look at some AWS docs and go, actually, this might suit more like an ECS or something like that. I have to just tell you what I've leveraged.
But equally, I could come back and say, oh, yes, but have you thought about this? So that synchronous conversation there could actually lead to a better decision being made. Whereas if you're spending the time on your own, you could go down that rabbit hole. And we come back together and saying, sorry, Ash, everything you just found out is nonsense because of this experience I've got. How do you how do you stop that from happening?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I'd say letting people explore on their own and come to their own conclusions is pretty optimal here, and therefore, like that really suits async naturally. Just being able to go off on your own and do a bit of a write up, and perhaps what could be good to include your point, Leon, around like perhaps I've got experience in something. I could be like, Leon, I don't think it'll work for this particular reason. Is once people have gone and done their own. On research, coming together and then sharing that research, and perhaps that could be done in a synchronous manner. And that'd save a lot of time because I've been in meetings in my career where we've tried to do this kind of thing in a meeting, and it's lasted 2 hours, and we've got nowhere. Like we're literally no closer to what we're trying to achieve. Where this gives a bit of structure to it.
So it's combining the two, or yeah, well, it is absolutely combining the two, and thinking to similar meetings I might have had in the past. It's you can't sometimes you can't take that pause, can you? Actually, to do that deep dive when sometimes you need to, and I guess then you'd need to maybe time box that time to do that deeper thinking, and then come back again.
Yeah, yeah. I think just having some form of I won't say deadline, but yeah, some sort of due date or set up a discussion for this,
Well, I think you
and that
you
way,
you nailed it earlier when you said structure, and I think that's what we need more of rather than this.
yeah. It's nice as well because people can do the deep thinking on their terms. So perhaps, you might have a meeting this afternoon, therefore you can't do it then, but I can. So I can do my own research when it suits me best, when I'm not being distracted. And likewise, you can do it another time when you're not distracted. So it really gets the best, it gets the best out of people, I find. And just enabling them to do the best work when it suits them because we can't control their schedules. Like everybody's got different things going on.
So you've set your agenda, you've got everybody to go away, do the appropriate bits of research, and then come back together for a synchronous meeting. Sorry, I have to be careful how I pronounce that. For a synchronous meeting. How else can you improve the structure and the usefulness of that meeting?
Well, this is a great question, and whether it's a meeting off the back of doing some like async research or whether it's a new meeting, I think this applies anywhere. So there's a term I came across on the internet, and it really stuck with me, and it's no agenda, no attender. And quite simply put, it's just literally labeling your meeting with a description of what the meeting's about, right? It's very, very simple, but yet more often than not, we certainly don't do that. I'm guilty of that as well. Just labeling the meeting, because if you don't label a meeting, and let's say we're inviting people that perhaps aren't privy to exactly what the meeting's about, how are they supposed to prepare for the meeting? Like, it's very hard to do if you don't know exactly what you're going to be discussing. And what I would add as well, in terms of a description, just having an outcome, like an objective of the meeting, like this is what we want to try and get out of the meeting, just to keep people focused and just reading that ahead of time as well. People will internalize that as something to get out of. And yeah, I just think these are really nice things to make meetings more productive and a bit more objective as well.
That sort of tackles making meetings useful generally. What about recurring meetings?
Yeah, so recurring meetings, we could probably spend a podcast just talking about those. Uh, but yeah, if I had to distill it into 3 points, I guess would be the benefit. I'd say the main benefit of a reoccurring meeting is it's really good to share information quickly. So I'm thinking here like an all hands meeting or like a town hall meeting, something where we want to broadcast important information to a lot of people. And naturally, you could say, well, Ash, we could do this async. Why not async? Well, often these meetings contain a lot of important information, and I've found it in the past where when important information is shared over, let's say, like Slack or Teams, you can interpret it both as a good thing and a bad thing. And it's because you're missing those non-verbal cues that comes with in-person meetings or video meetings that can completely change the actual meaning of the message. So I think it's really important, in fact, to have like a reoccurring meeting have this synchronous nature to it, just for the verbal cues. And secondly, it can always be recorded and posted somewhere else for people that can't attend. So I'd say that's one of the really positives about recurring meetings. I just wanted to start on a positive because it's quite easy to be negative about recurring meetings. One of the drawbacks I see of recurring meetings is often they they are a little bit similar to weeds in terms of over time there's just more and more recurrent meetings, and if you're not careful with your calendar they can certainly take over it. And This is a real negative for especially for people in leadership positions because you've still got when you join a company, you've got an expectation of your role, and yet you're attending more and more reoccurring meetings as the months and years go by. To me, you're still expected to deliver exactly what you signed up for in your role, but now you've got half the time to do it because 50% of your time is spent on reoccurring meetings, or maybe even more. So we have to be really, really careful about reoccurring meetings and just ensuring that they are valuable to us. Our CEO a while back, Nickel, he actually said that if you're not getting value from a meeting and you're not adding value to said meeting, then just leave the meeting. And likewise, this goes for chat Slack channels too. So it's really like reassuring and nice that that message has been pushed down right from the top. That just empowers us to make our own decision around meetings.
It's vote with your feet, isn't it? I mean, if anyone looks into open space technology, that's what that's all about. Whereby people can choose to go to a meeting and take part in it, or they do it in conferences where you choose to go to a particular session at the conference that someone's put up. If you get bored, you're more than, or you feel you're not adding anything useful, you're well within your rights within the way this meeting is set up is to actually just leave. And I think that's important. I mean, thinking about weeds, what do you have to do at least once a year is actually clear the weeds out. So actually just going in and, do we really need this meeting that we do every day?
Mm.
Yeah, of course we do. What would happen if we got rid of it?
Hmm.
Always an interesting question, I feel.
Yeah, I think Slack themselves may do that. I think once a year they kind of get rid of all meetings and see what comes back up, which is a bit of an extreme approach, but it's a approach.
Is it maker weeks that Slack do?
Yes, that's the term. Yes, maker weeks.
So they have a 1 week where all meetings are cancelled, and then they work out which one they're actually missing, or which ones they're actually missing.
Yeah, it's kind of like a soft reset.
Yeah, which is really it's really good. Yeah, what did we miss by not doing this? Not a lot. Right, okay, let's not add anything in.
Surely there was some. I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment. Surely there are some meetings which are kind of your standard ceremonies that you wouldn't necessarily contemplate cancelling, such as, I mean, stand up is a classic one, but what about retrospectives, for example?
Let's take. I'm really interested about what would happen if we cancel stand-ups. What's your immediate reaction? What would you miss?
For me, it would be speaking with my colleagues. Quite honestly, I see stand-ups as a bit of a hybrid meeting because often it's just, it's kickstarting your day, you're catching up with people perhaps over the weekend, seeing what they've been up to. And it just helps us forge those relationships with our colleagues, which I honestly think is the most important thing of an effective engineering team, just having strong relationships with one another, being able to rely on one another or ask questions and not feel uncomfortable with doing that. So, yes, I think stand ups definitely can be asynchronous, absolutely. But I also think that it'd be really important to make sure you schedule time together. Just chit chat, just catching up.
So you'd almost replace it with a start of the day meeting, wouldn't you?
Yeah, yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, start of the day meeting. Maybe you can trademark that.
Retrospectives are pretty sacrosanct as well, aren't they, Rob?
Personally speaking, yes. Although I know that I think Spotify have done some experiments around this as well, haven't they?
Yeah, so Spotify moved to a bit more of a async retrospective. They call it like a health check, and it's based on answering. I think it's about a dozen questions. My team actually do this, so I've been doing it for a long time now, like well over a year. And one of the things I really like about this is, well, there's two things. In fact, the first one is that it's a hybrid. So we don't have to all sit in the meeting, drawing sticky notes like you typically do. If you use Miro, you'll be familiar with doing that. So that saves quite a bit of time, right? Because you can do this ahead of time. The survey, you just fill it out when it's convenient to you, which is the main point of the sync, and then it's done. The second thing I really like about this as well is we leverage those categories and the results that people have given us, and then we structure the retrospective around those results and around those questions. Because what's happened to me in the past in my career is often we'll go completely off topic in a retrospective, and we will go to things that we literally can't control. We can't change them, we can't affect them, yet we will spend a tremendous amount of time in a retrospective talking about them and trying to change them. And the reality is not everything's ours to change. So by keeping it structured against categorization and against data that we've just filled out, it enables really productive conversation and really productive outputs. And what we get out of our retrospectives in my current team are things that we can actually action and affect and change. And it's just super refreshing. It makes it far less tedious, I would say.
I'm going to ask a very naive, potentially provocative question as a follow up. How do you make sure everybody does the async work?
Um, that's a good question. In the context of this survey, we have quite simply reminders. And usually, I wouldn't say it's 100% successful, if I'm brutally honest. But what I would say is about 90% successful. Usually, there's one person who's forgotten to do it. We're quite in the habit with doing it. So yeah, that one person might hold us up a little bit. But the good thing about the survey is that it's a point scale, and the questions are the same each time we do it. So it's quite quick to do because of the point scale. So it's like choose from 1 to 5. So it doesn't hold up too much. But yes, it's a great point.
I would actually say as well that, to borrow from the open space group again, is that one of their ideas is whoever turns up, they're the right people to have turned up. So whoever's filled in the survey for that particular moment, that's the right set of people to have filled in that survey. And yeah, okay, if someone's not filled it in, maybe they've got nothing to say. If they're consistently not filling it in, then it's probably something the team probably wants to talk to them about and say, have you really got nothing to say? But, you deal with that within the team. But what I love about what your team is doing in this is that you're actually giving yourselves a chance to do that deep thinking that you were talking about earlier. So often in retrospectives, you turn up, someone's got some retrospective games to play or something, and you feel really on the spot. Oh, I've got to think, I can't even remember what we did last week. Whereas doing this initial async survey from the based on the Spotify model means that you can actually think about, okay, what really did happen over the last week? What do I really want to talk about? So I can imagine you get much richer conversations as a result.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Even though it is a point system, you have to think about the questions. Like how easy. I think one of the questions is how easy has it been to release our software, create working software, and you do ponder and think about, okay, what have I been doing? Okay, how did that go? Okay, what about that deployment on Tuesday? Like it forces this exercise, and it's like this for each question. And then you go to the meeting with it freshly loaded up in mind, or potentially you've written it down. So yeah, it does facilitate those conversations, and it certainly makes me a lot more articulate than I otherwise would be.
And I guess arguably this kind of highlights a risk of meetings and meeting heavy cultures, right? That this notion that you have to have a meeting in order to manage people and make sure they contribute.
Yeah, it's giving autonomy back to people and treating people like grown-ups. I know Spotify wants to mention Spotify again, but they do that quite well. And yeah, another thing I've found with reoccurring meetings throughout my career is often you'll have a reoccurring meeting, and I think it's DHH, creator of Ruby on Rails, coined this phrase. You have the meeting to have the meeting, meaning like you have the meeting because it's in your calendar, but you don't actually have it for like a objective output reason. You just have it because you've always had it. And that's what you do in your working week. You have that reoccurring meeting, and it's just being mindful that this can happen because often people feel quite passionate around recurring meetings, the hosts of these meetings. but typically it can be that it was created to solve a problem that has been solved, but people don't want to let go of it. So I feel like we just have to be mindful as engineers, and as EMs, that we ensure that recurring meetings still hold their value, because the value might diminish over time, and that's fine. Like, that's totally fine. They don't always have to be as valuable as the first instance they were created. And if they're not that valuable, then bin it. And if it comes up again in a few months and the meeting's valuable again, then it's valuable again. I feel like attachment is a bad thing when it comes to recurring meetings.
It's the heart of agile, really, isn't it? You should be continually changing things when appropriate, rather than just rigidly setting to the same set of things all the time. I think another thing as well, do you ever find that when someone's scheduled a meeting to last 60 minutes, they are determined to fill that 60 minutes up? And sometimes it's fine just to say, 20 minutes in, are we done? Okay, right, let's go.
Yeah, I've certainly found that, and on that topic as well, a nice kind of I suppose meeting hygiene I'd define this as is if you are scheduling a meeting and it's going to last for an hour, schedule it for 55 minutes instead, because often people have back-to-back meetings and it can be really fatiguing, like for everybody involved. So just by making sure you cut that meeting off at 55 minutes past, let's say, rather than an hour on the dot, it just enables that person, stretch their leg, stretch their legs, get a glass of water, just have a little bit of a breather and just go into the next meeting a bit more refreshed. So that's one of the things I'd certainly advocate for, and I have seen this done at Moonpig as well, which is super nice. But yeah, I'd love that to happen all the time.
And particularly with remote working, because it is so easy just to sit in a chair and go from meeting to meeting to meeting. At least in the old
Yeah.
days, we would have to go between meeting rooms.
Yeah, you're right there, and doing that, Leon, it's like operating in a synchronous manner, and without the A, I've realised I've just said async, I meant synchronous. Um, yeah, it's really tricky because that's how you induce burnout, right? Like meetings after meetings after meeting, like being in the office and having to talk non-stop and try and do your role as well. Like you're inciting burnout there, like that gets really hard to manage. So I think, yeah, just taking a little bit of time away and just a space to breathe and think about what just happened in that meeting and about the other meeting as well that you're going to attend soon. It's just a good habit to get in.
There's obviously a lot of material we've referenced. Spotify, Ash referenced DHH as well. Are there any other resources that people can go to if they want to learn more about this and learn more about the research and what they can do?
Yeah, so there's a book I read a good few years back now when I gained an interest in this. It's called the Async First Playbook, I think it's called. From memory, it's like a few hundred pages, not that long, 300 pages, and it's really concise. It just tries to give practical advice. And it does make you reflect on a lot of things you take advantage of. Like, for instance, I've mentioned about like the inclusivity side of meetings. Like, I'm really fortunate that I don't have hearing problems, and I'm really fortunate that English is my first language. Not everybody's in the same situation as me, and also some people, you know, don't like speaking up in meetings, and that can be for a variety of reasons. They could just be introvert by nature or something else. So it's just a case of being mindful that everybody's different, and if we want the best outcomes from solving problems and creating new services, then we want a diverse workforce. And in order to use that effectively, we need a communication medium that appeals to everyone and gives everyone, equal space to reflect and think. And that's where I think async, in a nutshell, has the main advantage, because yeah, I've seen it before. I know it's a slight tangent, but I've seen it before where um, it can be that the loudest voice wins in a discussion, for instance, and it's not the best idea necessarily wins, and it's just because some people are much more vocal than others. And I'm interested in, as an engineer, I'm interested in the optimal solution. What's the best? How do we solve this problem, right? What's the best solution to this problem? I don't care who came up with it, and I don't care if it was written down or in an auditory manner. And what I care about is the best. And it just seems like Async caters to more people than your typical meeting would.
And we're not saying remove meetings completely, it's just be a bit more sensible with what you're expecting to get out of them and give people that opportunity to actually do some work asynchronously before just diving in unprepared into a meeting. The great thing about the book Ash just mentioned as well, it actually gives you some tips and advice on how to present your ideas written down. So there's some practice, some tips for writing, getting the most out of that as well. So it's actually well worth a look.
That's all we've got time for today. Thank you very much to Ash and Leon. Join us next time on the Moonpig Tech Podcast.